You were born in medieval England, 1240 AD. You're 13 years old and your entire future gets decided over breakfast. Your father barely looks up from his porridge as he announces you'll be joining the convent next week. No discussion, no choice, just a cold statement that seals your fate forever. Welcome to medieval life, where becoming a nun wasn't always about finding God. Sometimes it was about your family finding a way to get rid of you. You might think medieval nuns spent their days peacefully praying, copying beautiful manuscripts, and living in quiet contemplation. Hollywood loves showing us these serene women in flowing robes, singing hymns in candlelit chapels, but the reality, it was brutal, degrading, and absolutely nothing like the romanticized version we see today. Let me paint you the real picture of what it meant to be a medieval nun, because trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at those peaceful convent scenes the same way again. We're talking about forced labor, starvation diets, physical punishment, and a power structure that would make modern corporations look like summer camps. But first, let me tell you how most women ended up there in the first place, because spoiler alert, it rarely involved a divine calling. Your family needed money. Maybe they couldn't afford dowries for all their daughters. Maybe you were considered too difficult, too independent, or just plain unlucky. The church offered a convenient solution. Pay a smaller fee to the convent, and boom, problem solved. Your daughter becomes God's responsibility, not yours. The process started with what they called the ceremony of taking the veil. Sounds spiritual, right? Wrong. They literally dragged you to the front of the church while your family watched. The priest would cut off all your hair in front of everyone, symbolically killing your old life. Then they'd force you into rough, scratchy robes that smelled like mold and decay from the previous nun who died wearing them. But here's where it gets really twisted. They made you lie prostrate on the floor while they threw dirt on your body, simulating your burial to the world. You were officially dead to your former life, dead to your family, dead to any dreams you might have had. And you were maybe 14 years old when this happened. Once inside those convent walls, the real nightmare began. Forget about gentle morning prayers and peaceful meditation. Your day started at 3 in the morning with bells clanging loud enough to wake the dead. No snooze button, no rolling over for 5 more minutes. Miss the bell, and you'd face punishment that would make military boot camp look gentle. The daily schedule was designed to break you down completely. 7 prayer services throughout the day, each lasting hours. Matins at 3 a.m., lauds at dawn, prime at 6, terce at 9, sext at noon, none at 3 p.m., and vespers at sunset. And that was just the praying. Between each service, you had manual labor that would destroy your body piece by piece, scrubbing stone floors until your knees bled, hauling water from wells that seemed bottomless, washing clothes in freezing streams that turned your hands blue and cracked, copying manuscripts for hours until your fingers cramped and your eyes burned from straining in dim candlelight. And if your handwriting wasn't perfect, they'd make you start the entire page over again. The food situation was its own special kind of torture. Medieval convents practiced extreme fasting as a form of spiritual discipline. But spiritual discipline is just a fancy way of saying organized starvation. You got thin porridge for breakfast, watery soup for lunch, and maybe some bread for dinner. Meat was forbidden except on special holy days, which happened maybe 5 times a year. And here's the kicker, the hierarchy inside these convents was more vicious than any high school drama you can imagine. The abbess ruled with absolute power, and she wasn't afraid to use it. Older nuns could punish younger ones for any perceived slight. Looking the wrong way, speaking out of turn, or even walking too loudly could result in days of solitary confinement or public humiliation. But the physical punishments were just the beginning of what made medieval convent life absolutely unbearable. The psychological warfare was where things got truly horrific. These weren't just religious institutions, they were sophisticated systems designed to crush your spirit completely. The abbess and senior nuns had perfected techniques that would make modern cult leaders jealous. They started with isolation. New nuns were forbidden from speaking to anyone for their first 6 months. Complete silence. You couldn't ask questions, couldn't seek comfort, couldn't even whisper a prayer request. Break this rule, and they'd extend your silence period by another month. Some women went insane from the isolation alone. Then came the guilt manipulation. Everything bad that happened was your fault. Storm damaged the chapel roof? You must have sinful thoughts. Another nun got sick? Your impure heart was spreading spiritual disease. The vegetables in the garden died? God was punishing the entire convent because of your wickedness. They convinced you that you were personally responsible for every misfortune that befell the community. But the worst part was how they turned the nuns against each other. They created a system where reporting on your sisters was considered holy duty. Whisper about missing your family, and someone would tell the abbess you were showing dangerous attachment to worldly things. Share extra food with a hungry nun, and you'd both face punishment for breaking the rules of fasting. Express doubt about any teaching, and you'd be branded as spiritually corrupt. The punishments themselves were designed to humiliate you in front of the entire community. They'd make you eat your meals on the floor like an animal while the other nuns watched in silence, force you to confess imaginary sins in front of everyone, detailing how evil and worthless you were, strip you down and make you sleep on bare stone as penance for pride. And here's something that'll make your skin crawl. Many of these convents had what they called the discipline chamber, a small windowless room where they'd lock you up for days at a time. No light, no warmth, no human contact, just you and whatever rats happened to be living in there. They'd slide thin gruel under the door once a day, if you were lucky. But wait, it gets worse. Because even when you thought you'd endured everything possible, they had one final twist that would haunt you forever: the death preparations. When elderly nuns were dying, they forced the younger ones to watch the entire process, not as a mercy, not as respect for the dead, but as psychological conditioning. You'd sit for hours watching your sisters waste away, listening to their final gasps, seeing their bodies prepared for burial. They wanted you to understand that this rotting corpse would be your future too. They'd make you kiss the dead nun's feet before burial, whispering prayers about how blessed she was to finally escape this world. But here's the sick part: they weren't celebrating her release from earthly suffering. They were programming you to see death as your only possible salvation. Think about that level of psychological manipulation. They convinced terrified teenage girls that their only hope was dying as quickly as possible. And the cherry on top of this nightmare Sunday, many convents kept detailed records of every punishment, every confession, every moment of weakness. Your failures followed you for decades. Breakdown crying in year 1, they'd bring it up in year 20 to prove you were still spiritually defective. Show kindness to another nun, written down as dangerous emotional attachment. These weren't just prisons, they were psychological laboratories where human breaking points were studied and perfected. So the next time someone tells you how romantic and peaceful medieval times were, remind them of this: those stone walls didn't protect holy women seeking God. They trapped young girls in a nightmare of starvation, abuse, and psychological torture. Medieval nuns didn't find salvation in those convents. They found suffering that would break anyone's spirit. Sometimes history's darkest chapters hide behind the prettiest facades.